Have you ever had your work stolen right from under you? I was leading a $19 million project when the CEO's nephew suddenly took my place, but they never checked what was hidden on page 47 of my contract, and that mistake cost them everything. If you've ever been undervalued at work, you'll want to see how this plays out. Hit subscribe and like now to follow my journey from corporate scapegoat to the executive who called all the shots. I never thought I'd be the one to bring a Fortune 500 company to its knees, but life has a funny way of turning the tables when you least expect it. My name is Madeline Grant, and until 3 months ago, I was the lead project manager at Vertex Technologies, one of the largest tech consulting firms in Boston. I'd spent 6 years climbing the corporate ladder, working 60-hour weeks, and sacrificing more personal relationships than I care to admit. By 32, I had finally secured my position overseeing our most ambitious project to date, a $19 million digital transformation initiative for Meridian Healthcare, the third largest hospital network in the country. This was my career-defining moment. The Meridian project wasn't just another corporate overhaul, it was revolutionary. We were implementing an AI-driven patient management system that would reduce wait times by 40% and potentially save thousands of lives annually. I had assembled an elite team of developers, data scientists, and healthcare specialists. We were 6 months into the 18-month timeline, and everything was progressing ahead of schedule. Then came the email that changed everything. Madeline, please stop by my office at 2 p.m. today. Richard Blackwell, CEO. Richard rarely communicated directly with anyone below C-suite level. My stomach knotted as I straightened my charcoal blazer and headed to the executive floor. Take a seat, Madeline. Richard gestured toward the leather chair opposite his desk. Behind him, floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Boston Harbor. I'll get straight to the point. We're making some adjustments to the Meridian project. A younger man in an ill-fitting suit who couldn't have been more than 25 leaned against the credenza, scrolling through his phone. Richard didn't bother introducing him. Tyler will be taking over as lead on the Meridian account effective immediately, Richard continued. You'll transition all materials to him by the end of the week. Tyler finally looked up from his phone and gave me a smug nod. May I ask why? I kept my voice steady, though my heart was racing. Richard cleared his throat. We need someone with fresh perspective. Tyler graduated from Harvard Business School last year and has some innovative ideas for the project. And his relation to you is... I already knew the answer. Richard's expression hardened. That's irrelevant, Madeline. Tyler is my nephew, yes, but he's more than qualified. I've spent 2 years designing this system architecture. The Meridian board specifically requested me to lead this project, I countered. And now they've approved Tyler. This isn't a negotiation. You'll be reassigned to the Westlake retail account. Jennifer will brief you tomorrow. The Westlake account. A $200,000 point-of-sale system for a regional supermarket chain. It was the corporate equivalent of being sent to the minors after pitching in the World Series. I left Richard's office in a daze. By the time I reached my desk, Tyler had already emailed the entire team announcing himself as the new project lead and scheduling a vision reset meeting for the following morning. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at the Boston skyline through my window. Rain pelted against the glass, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. This project was mine. I had sacrificed everything for it. And now it was being handed to an inexperienced nepotism case who would almost certainly run it into the ground. I pulled out my contract from the home safe and began reading it line by line. Vertex had ironclad non-compete and non-disclosure agreements. If I quit, I couldn't work in healthcare tech for 2 years. If I spoke to Meridian directly, I could be sued for breach of contract. Then, on page 47, Section 12.4, subsection C, I found something interesting. In the event of reassignment from a client-facing project exceeding $10 million in value, employee retains intellectual property rights to all proprietary methodologies and frameworks developed specifically for said project, unless formally transferred via IP assignment, Form 27B. I read it 3 more times to be sure. Then I called my college roommate, Zoe, who had become a corporate attorney. Yes, if you developed the core methodology yourself and haven't signed it away, it's technically yours, she confirmed after reviewing the clause. But Madeline, be careful. Vertex has an army of lawyers. This is a dangerous game. They started it, I replied, a plan already forming in my mind. The next morning, I walked into the office with my head held high, a certified letter in my purse, and the first genuine smile I'd worn in days. The Vision Reset meeting was exactly the disaster I anticipated. Tyler stood at the head of the conference table, his Harvard Business School diploma practically glowing above his head as he outlined his plan to pivot the entire Meridian project. The framework Madeline developed is outdated, he declared, gesturing toward the whiteboard where he'd scrawled a confusing flowchart. We need to leverage blockchain and metaverse integration to truly revolutionize patient care. I watched my team exchange confused glances. Blockchain for a patient management system? It was like suggesting we use a flamethrower to make toast. Emma, our lead developer, raised her hand. The current architecture has already passed 3 rounds of security audits. Meridian specifically requested HIPAA-compliant cloud infrastructure, not blockchain. Tyler waved dismissively. That's the old way of thinking. My uncle, Richard, fully supports this direction. I remained silent throughout the meeting, taking meticulous notes and recording everything with the voice memo app on my phone. As everyone filed out, Tyler approached me. Hey, Madeline, I know this must be tough for you, he said with feigned sympathy, but I need you to transfer all your documentation and access credentials by end of day. I'm presenting to the Meridian board tomorrow. Of course, I smiled. I've prepared a comprehensive transition package. I just need you to sign this form, acknowledging receipt of all project materials. I slid a document across the table. What's this? He barely glanced at it. Standard Vertex protocol for project handovers. Just confirming you're receiving all the materials you requested. He scribbled his signature without reading it. Mistake number 1. What Tyler had actually signed was Form 27B, acknowledging that I retained intellectual property rights to the core system architecture I had developed. The very form mentioned in my contract. Over the next week, I dutifully trained Tyler on the project basics, while watching him systematically dismantle 6 months of progress. He fired 2 key team members and replaced them with fraternity brothers who couldn't code their way out of a paper bag. He canceled crucial meetings with Meridian's IT department to attend long lunches with Richard. And most alarmingly, he began cutting corners on patient data security to accelerate development. Meanwhile, I was quietly documenting everything and preparing for what came next. 15 days after my demotion, the first major crisis hit. Tyler's blockchain initiative had created a critical security vulnerability that exposed test patient data. Meridian's chief information security officer was furious. Fix this immediately or we're reevaluating our contract, he warned during an emergency call that Tyler had asked me to join as technical support. That evening, I received an urgent text from Emma. Tyler's blaming you for the security breach. Says you deliberately sabotaged the architecture. Emergency meeting tomorrow with Richard and Meridian execs. This was it. They were setting me up as the scapegoat. I spent the night preparing, then dressed carefully the next morning in my most professional outfit, a navy suit that had seen me through countless presentations and negotiations. I arrived at the office an hour early and headed straight to the conference room. Richard looked surprised to see me setting up my laptop. Madeline, this meeting is for senior leadership only. As the original architect of the Meridian system, I thought my presence would be valuable, I replied calmly. Especially since I'm apparently being blamed for recent issues. Before Richard could respond, the Meridian executives began arriving. Dr. Eleanor Chen, their chief medical officer, smiled warmly when she saw me. Madeline, thank goodness you're here. We've been trying to reach you for weeks. The meeting began with Tyler attempting to explain away the security breach while subtly shifting blame in my direction. I waited patiently as he fumbled through technical explanations that made less sense by the minute. When he finally finished, I opened my laptop. If I may, I said, connecting to the projector. "I'd like to offer some context." Richard started to object, but Dr. Chen cut him off. "Please, Madeline, we'd appreciate your perspective." What appeared on screen was a side-by-side comparison. My original system architecture on the left, and Tyler's improvements on the right, with the security vulnerabilities clearly highlighted. "The breach occurred here, here, and here," I explained, pointing to specific changes Tyler had implemented. These modifications directly contradicted the security protocols established in the original architecture. The room fell silent as I methodically walked through the evidence. Then I pulled up the Form 27B that Tyler had signed. 3 weeks ago, I was removed from this project without explanation and replaced by Mr. Blackwell's nephew. According to Vertex's own contracts in this signed form, I retain intellectual property rights to the core architecture I developed. I'm not here to create problems, but I cannot allow my professional reputation to be damaged by changes I did not authorize or approve. Dr. Chen looked thunderstruck. "We were told you requested reassignment due to personal reasons." "That is categorically untrue," I replied, pulling out the certified letter I'd prepared. "In fact, I've documented every step of this transition. I'm formally notifying both Vertex and Meridian that any use of my intellectual property moving forward will require proper attribution and compliance with the original security frameworks." Richard's face had turned an alarming shade of purple. "This is insubordination. You're terminated, effective immediately." I smiled. "I thought you might say that." Security escorted me from the building within 30 minutes, barely giving me time to collect my personal items. As I carried my small box of belongings to the parking garage, Tyler rushed after me. "You've made a huge mistake," he hissed. "My uncle will bury you. You'll never work in this industry again." I placed my box in the trunk of my car and turned to face him. "Tyler, your uncle didn't build Vertex by cutting corners and playing favorites. The company succeeded because of people like me who actually know what they're doing. You had a chance to learn from us, but instead, you chose to step on us. That was your mistake, not mine." I left him standing there, mouth agape, as I drove away from the building that had been my professional home for 6 years. By the time I reached my apartment, my phone was buzzing with messages from team members expressing shock at my termination. Emma called immediately. "Everyone's in an uproar," she reported. "The Meridian execs walked out after you left. Richard's been locked in his office with legal for hours." "How are you holding up?" I asked, concerned about potential fallout for my former team. "We're fine, but we're worried about you. What's your plan?" That was the question, wasn't it? I had stood my ground on principle, but at what cost? I had bills to pay, a career to salvage, and a reputation to protect. "I'm figuring it out," I told her, trying to sound more confident than I felt. That night, I barely slept. By morning, I had 3 voicemails from unknown numbers and an email from Vertex's legal department demanding I cease and desist all communication regarding proprietary company information. I forwarded everything to Zoe, who called me immediately. "They're scared," she said. "That cease and desist is boilerplate intimidation. They know you haven't disclosed anything confidential, but they're hoping you'll get spooked and back down. So what now?" "Now we wait." "But Madeline, you should know that your Form 27B play was brilliant but risky. They might countersue, claiming you misrepresented the form to Tyler." "I didn't misrepresent anything," I protested. "He signed it of his own accord." "I know, but litigation isn't about truth. It's about who tells the most convincing story." 3 days later, I received an unexpected call from an unknown number. It was Dr. Chen from Meridian. "Madeline, I hope I'm not overstepping, but I wanted to check on you personally. What happened in that meeting was concerning." "I appreciate that, Dr. Chen. I'm doing okay." "Meridian has formally requested that Vertex reinstate you as project lead," she continued. "The board was extremely disturbed by what we witnessed." My heart skipped. "Thank you, but I doubt Richard will agree to that. He may not have a choice. We've suspended all payments until this situation is resolved. The security breach exposed Meridian to significant liability, and we need someone we trust in charge." After we hung up, I sat on my couch, staring at the phone. This was validation, but also a complication. Going back to Vertex under these circumstances would be awkward at best, toxic at worst. The next day, I received a formal letter from Vertex requesting a meeting to discuss reconciliation options. Attached was a non-disclosure agreement they wanted me to sign before the meeting. I forwarded it to Zoe, who called me within minutes. "Do not sign this," she said emphatically. "This NDA would prevent you from discussing anything about your termination or the Meridian Project ever again. It's a gag order disguised as a peace offering. So I shouldn't meet with them?" "Oh, you should absolutely meet with them, but on your terms, not theirs." 2 days later, I walked into Vertex's offices as a visitor, signing in at the security desk I had passed thousands of times as an employee. I was escorted to a conference room where Richard waited alongside Tyler and 2 members of the legal team. "Madeline," Richard began with forced cordiality, "thank you for coming. We believe there's been a misunderstanding that we'd like to resolve amicably." "I'm listening," I replied, placing my own legal folder on the table but not opening it. "We're prepared to offer you a consulting position to help transition the Meridian Project back on track. 6 months, generous compensation, and of course, we'll need you to sign our standard confidentiality agreements." He slid a document across the table. I didn't touch it. "Is Tyler staying on the project?" Richard shifted uncomfortably. "Tyler will be moving to a different division to broaden his experience." I nodded. "And my original team?" "We've had some restructuring. Emma Davies has taken a position elsewhere. Several others have been reassigned. So they'd pushed out the people who had likely defended me." Classic. "Here's my counteroffer," I said, finally opening my folder. "I'll return as lead on the Meridian Project as a fully independent contractor. My company will bill Vertex directly. I'll select my own team, including rehiring anyone who was terminated or reassigned, and I'll report directly to the Meridian board, not to Vertex leadership." Richard's face reddened. "That's completely unacceptable. You can't dictate terms to us." "Actually, I can. Meridian has suspended payments until I'm reinstated as project lead with full authority. They've also indicated they're prepared to cancel the contract entirely and work with me directly if necessary." "That would violate your non-compete," one of the lawyers interjected. I smiled. "Not according to Section 14(2), which states that the non-compete is void if termination occurs due to organizational restructuring or reassignment that materially diminishes employees' role or responsibilities. My demotion and subsequent termination fits that definition precisely." The room fell silent as the lawyer frantically flipped through his copy of my contract. "Additionally," I continued, "I've received 3 job offers in the past week, including one from Meridian's direct competitor, Atlas Health. I'm not here because I need this job. I'm here because I care about this project and the patients it will ultimately serve." Richard stared at me with a mixture of anger and, surprisingly, respect. "You've clearly come prepared." "I learned from the best, Richard. Vertex taught me to always protect my value. I'm just putting those lessons into practice." 1 month later, I was back at Vertex. But everything had changed. My new business cards read, "Madeline Grant Consulting, Project Executive." I had my own office on the executive floor, not far from Richard's. My contract gave me full authority over the Meridian Project, including hiring and budget decisions. My first act was to rehire Emma and the other team members who had been pushed out. My second was to roll back all of Tyler's innovations and restore the original system architecture. Richard kept his distance, speaking to me only when absolutely necessary. Tyler had been transferred to a satellite office in Minneapolis. The tension was palpable whenever I attended executive meetings, but no one dared challenge my position. Meridian had made it clear, no Madeline, no contract. The project progressed rapidly under my renewed leadership. We recovered the lost time and even accelerated certain phases. 6 months after my return, we deployed the first module at Meridian's flagship hospital in Chicago. The results exceeded even our most optimistic projections. Patient wait times dropped by 37% in the first week alone. Dr. Chen called me personally to share the news. The board is thrilled, Madeline. You've turned a potential disaster into a triumph. I had an excellent team, I replied, looking through the glass wall of my office at my developers huddled around a whiteboard. They deserved better leadership than they were getting. Well, Vertex is lucky to have you back. However unconventional the arrangement. After we hung up, I leaned back in my chair, considering how dramatically my professional life had changed. I was essentially running an independent company within Vertex. Several team members had even asked if I would hire them directly once the Meridian project concluded. The idea had merit. With my reputation now enhanced rather than destroyed, I could probably launch a successful consulting firm specializing in healthcare technology. Meridian would almost certainly follow me, and possibly bring other hospital networks along. My reflections were interrupted by a knock at my door. It was Richard. "Do you have a moment?" he asked, more humble than I'd ever seen him. "Of course." I gestured to the chair opposite my desk. He sat down heavily. "The Meridian board called me today. They're extremely pleased with the project progress. That's good news for everyone." "Yes." He paused, clearly uncomfortable. "Madeline, I owe you an apology. What I did, replacing you with Tyler, was short-sighted and unfair. I let personal relationships cloud my business judgment. I hadn't expected this. Richard Blackwell wasn't known for admitting mistakes." "I appreciate you saying that," I replied carefully. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about Vertex's future," he continued. "Our chief innovation officer is retiring next quarter. I'd like you to consider the position." I almost laughed. "You're offering me a C-suite role after everything that happened?" "Precisely because of everything that happened. You stood your ground, protected your intellectual property, and proved your value beyond question. That's exactly the kind of leadership Vertex needs." I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity, but found none. "I'll need to think about it," I said finally. "My consulting business is just getting started, and I've grown rather fond of my independence." Richard nodded. "I understand. The offer remains open." He stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and Tyler has submitted his resignation. He's joining his father's real estate business in Connecticut." I couldn't help but smile. I wish him well. After Richard left, I walked to the window and gazed out at the Boston skyline. The same view I'd stared at on that rainy night when I thought my career was over. Now I stood at a crossroads with options I couldn't have imagined then. I could join Vertex's leadership and help reform the company culture from within. I could launch my own firm and compete directly with Vertex. Or I could continue this unique hybrid arrangement, maintaining my independence while leveraging Vertex's resources. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Champagne tonight to celebrate the Chicago deployment?" "Absolutely," I replied. "We've earned it." As I gathered my things to meet Emma and the team, I realized that the hidden clause in my contract hadn't just saved my career, it had transformed it. By standing up for myself, I had discovered strength I didn't know I possessed. I had protected my work, my reputation, and my future. Sometimes you have to be replaced to discover you're irreplaceable. The Meridian project would be complete in another 6 months. By then, I would have my next move planned. Whatever I decided, I would approach it from a position of power, not fear. I had written my own hidden clause into my career. Never again would I let someone else determine my value. As I left the office that evening, I passed Richard's door. He was working late, looking more tired than I'd ever seen him. For a moment, I felt sympathy. Leadership was lonely. Perhaps that's why he had tried to elevate Tyler, a misguided attempt to create a legacy. My own legacy would be different. It would be built on merit, not nepotism. On innovation, not intimidation. On standing firm when the easy path would be to step aside. And most importantly, it would be a legacy entirely of my own making.